Well, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending once again on which coast you're on or in the center of our wonderful country. We will be having today's C-SPAN webinar, which talks about the anatomy of survival under the COVID universe, a week of 13 weeks that Joel and Bruce, two individuals that probably need no introduction, but Joel English from Ames Centura and Tidewater Tech, and Bruce Schneider from Ambassador will be sharing with you, as well as a brief update that I'll provide on the regulatory side. We want to welcome the over 300 of you that have registered for today's webinar. We'll go through the do's and don'ts and some of the housekeeping reminders at 5 minutes before the hour and then at the top of the hour before turning to our presentation. So those of you who are starting to come online, welcome. We'll get started here in just about 10 minutes. Well, good afternoon or good morning once again, everybody who's starting to join in. We now have over 90 of you out of the 300 plus registrants for today's C-SPAN CARES Act webinar. We welcome those of you who are joining a few minutes early. We will start here in just in about another 5 minutes with our wonderful presentation today on the anatomy of school survival of the COVID-19 pandemic. I've looked back over a 13-week period presented by Dr. Joel English and Bruce Schneider. Joel from Ames Centura and Tidewater Tech, and Bruce from Ambassador, who have some great information to share with you. I will do a brief summary of some of the new information happening with regard to the CARES Act here in Washington. So welcome those of you who are attending. We'll do one more reminder of the do's and don'ts before we get started in another 5 minutes. We welcome those of you who are with us thus far, and we'll talk to you again in 5 minutes. Joel and Bruce, you want to come online with your cameras as well?
Certainly.
There you are, kind sir.
Happy to join. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you both. Well, we have right at 2 o'clock, the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you, East Coast, West Coast, and everywhere in between, for joining us on another one of the Central States Private Education Network, or now Career Schools Private Education Network, CARES Act webinars. We have changed our name. We made that transition at the start of the year. So just some of you, it's kind of hard to make the transition sometimes, but we did want to let you know of and remind you of that continued change of the maturation of our organization's process under the tutelage and leadership of Joel when he was president, and now with Michelle Ernst as president. For those of you who are joining us today, we are going to have a brief summary of the information that is provided from the department in a number of areas. But before we do that, a couple of housekeeping things. As we do with all of the C-SPEN webinars, this is being recorded. That way you have the opportunity to go back and review the video as well as the slide presentation. We are getting even more savvy. You will be able to download the PowerPoint presentations, and we're going to go back and backfill all of the previous. Many individuals have asked for just the PowerPoint to look at and pull some of the information off of the slides. We've learned how to do that. So another addition to our capabilities and hopefully the resources of value to you. Reminding you as well that we do have and do often look to a great deal of time shared with our community in the form of questions and answers. So at the conclusion of this particular webinar, we will be entertaining and opening it up for questions of Joel and Bruce as we look towards the presentation and discussions on the topics of the survival of a system of institutions under the pandemic, a 13-week review looking backwards retroactively. And then I think as well, you're going to hear some creative and good information on looking prospectively over the course of the next 13 to 14 weeks as well. Before we get into that, just a couple of quick things from the agenda. Joel, if you can go ahead and slide. I do want to first start by recognizing Dr. Joel English and Bruce Schneider. Joel is, as I think many of you are aware, from Ames Centura and Tidewater Tech, where he is the Executive Vice President. And we also have Bruce Schneider from Ambassador. Bruce is the VP of Engineering at Ambassador Education Solutions. So we thank the two of them for being our primary presenters today. I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about the latest and new guidance from the Department of Education, as you'll see from the agenda. Turn it over to Bruce and Joel for the vast majority of today's presentation, and then do the question and answer as we talked about. So very briefly, what's the new guidance? Well, there's two things that have happened and more yet to come this week. Many of you who attended our presentation with Principal Deputy Undersecretary Diane Hour-Jones on Tuesday of this week, along with the panelist of accreditors from most of the accreditors that are responsible for the oversight of our community. We're all together on Tuesday, and we're talking about issues related to clinicals, internships, externships, and practicum. And a number of those areas where within our disciplines, because they are so tactile and are so geared to the communities and the desire for the ability to apply the education as the students are learning it in the actual career fields. Diane shared with us on that presentation that in fact the department would be posting at least one, if not two pieces of additional guidance for the CARES Act. Well, yesterday, one of those two pieces of information was shared with the entire higher education community. Under the CARES Act, and specifically with regard to the higher education emergency relief funds, the two tranches of money or two portions of money that institutions that are Title IV participants are eligible for, half going to the students, or at least half could go to this institution that could go to the students as well. Those funds, based on the disruptions as a relation to and in response to the COVID pandemic, have been released or are being released. But one of the requirements that the statute also put in very prescriptive language, and Congress truly intended, was for those funds to be tracked. And reporting becomes a major necessity in the ability to monitor and oversee how those funds are being expended by all institutions of higher education. And the statute specifically put a 30-day time frame for the first reporting to take place 30 days from the institution's receipt of the first forms of those funds, the student portion of those funds, in terms of providing your reports and guidance. Well, that information was released yesterday and basically summarizes in regulatory form a number of the guidance and provisions that were in the statute. We'll share more information on that in an upcoming email blast to everybody, dictating and basically regurgitating a lot of the information that the Department of Education had put forward. Joel, I lost your slides. Are you still there?
I am indeed. Are you able to see them okay?
I cannot, but that does not mean they're not there. There they are. It just went behind the screen for me. The other portion is the long-awaited, literally over a year and a half, wait for the Department of Education to release their final regulations, not the notice of proposed rulemaking, but the final regulations with regard to Title IX and oversight as it relates to issues regarding violence against women, all sorts of assessment of campus security, campus crime, but in particular, a great deal with regard to circumstances and situations of accusations of those areas of violence against women, bullying, cyber stalking, and certainly the most horrific and egregious of those, rape and other forms of crimes against individuals that are all part of Title IX. The new regulations came out yesterday in an unofficial form, some 2,033 pages of new guidance that is, for the first time, an actual change from the Obama administration's publication of guidance in the form of electronic announcements to actual definitive regulations that carry much stronger weight. These areas in this guidance is a significant undertaking to review. Many of you will recall that these negotiations began back in 2018. The department published a notice of proposed rulemaking back in November of 2018 and received over 123 to 125,000 responses to that regulation through the Department of Ed's website, and overall the number is supposedly somewhere closer to 200,000 to 230,000, depending on how you count it all. Nevertheless, it shows that this is an issue of great importance to the higher education community in toto, when you consider that the major issues that have been important to our community, the most comments that were ever received for one of our specific issues was around 90,000 comments with regard to Gainful Employment 1.0. So you can see we're dwarfed in terms of the implications and the concerns of this from a much broader community, which is one of the reasons it took the department as long as it did to publish the final regulations. It's also the reason that the document is over 2,000 pages, because a lot of that is a discussion of the comments that were received and the department's response before determining whether or not any changes were made to the final regulations that they've now published. We're going through those like the rest of the community, and we'll have information for you on those hopefully within the weeks ahead. The one thing that everybody lit on from the very early review is that the department is requesting that institutions start to implement this by August 14th. So we've got a lot of work to do to all educate ourselves on the details and then make sure that we are working towards, if not fully compliant, by that date. Last but certainly not least, coming attractions. Dr. Jones also said in her presentation that we could expect additional guidance on the CARES Act, and specifically guidance as it related to a number of those open-ended areas on the policy side that are most important to our community. Those dealing with issues such as satisfactory academic progress, the financial responsibility standards, and how the changes with regard to CARES Act may or may not impact institutions' compliance with and calculation of things like the composite score, issues related to the return of Title IV funds policy, and the stoppage that is required in the statute of the return of monies for a student who withdraws as a result of situations related to the COVID pandemic from having to return their Pell Grants or student loans. That brings with it a whole sort of nuanced questions within regard to financial aid. So we're looking forward to that guidance as well as much, much more. Diane said that it would be out this week. In conversations I've had yet today with Department of Ed officials, it may come out yet this afternoon, but more than likely tomorrow. So on top of the 2,033 pages of Title IX, we also get to go through the new guidance with regard to policy. But what we're here to talk about today is a look back over 13 weeks and how a group of institutions working with the community in order to help in the system getting through all of the trials and tribulations are going to share with you how they did it, what they've learned, and some of, as I'm not stealing their thunder, some of the kumbaya moments and some of the revelations that also came as a result. So without further ado, Joel, Bruce, I want to turn it over to you and say thank you to you gentlemen for, number one, offering this up as an opportunity to share with the community and the ability for C-SPAN to be the vehicle in which the two of you chose to do it. Gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you.
Tom, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for signaling a collective kumbaya, because I think that's it's fair to say that's I don't know, to some extent what this is today. I'm Joel English. I'm the executive vice president of a group of schools called Aviation Institute of Maintenance, 13 of those campuses, 5 schools called Centura College and 1 called Tidewater Tech. And just like you, we've gone through a couple of months of that we've never experienced anything like it. And the interesting thing is, many of you could be giving, just about any of you could be giving this presentation. If it's a presentation about, hey, here's how we have survived and thrived and made things happen. We've surprised ourselves in a lot of ways, and a lot of you have too. But there's those who are participating as attendees in this conference are just incredibly impressive people. I had the opportunity to take a look at the attendee list, and Kirk Ham from Conservatory of Recording Arts here, one of the greatest preeminent recording schools in America, is with us. Fred Freeman from Pima Medical Institute, just a great institution in the western part of the country. Jim Tolbert brought a big group of people from Vista College, just a great institution. And there are universities, Duke University, University of North Carolina are on this line, and as are a lot of small colleges around the country, like Bellis Academy, one of the greatest cosmetology schools that our country has. Adams College, Valley College, SIE Institute, Penco Tech, City Colleges, Gemological Institute of America, the preeminent gemology school in California. So many of you here to kind of, I don't want to say commiserate, but certainly collaborate and hear a little bit about how a sister institution has gotten through these times. So thank you for letting me be the speaker. It's a presentation that I think many of us could give, and I hope that I'm able to sort of provide some enlightenment and some ideas. What we're going to do is kind of take a look at the last actually the last 2 months plus the next 2 months in the form of 13 weeks. For those who suffer from triskaidekaphobia, I apologize in advance. The number 13 is going to be thrown around here. And what I'm going to do over the next hour with Bruce's help is to talk a little bit about the weeks and how we've handled this situation as we go. And it really all did start for us on Friday, the 13th of March. That was the time that our world really clearly demonstrated things are going to get strange over the coming weeks and months. Obviously, we had seen and heard of coronavirus well before then. The fears of coronavirus becoming a reality in American culture and life was intensifying. That was the week in which public schools across the country closed for 2 weeks, right? And in our world, we had a large ribbon cutting ceremony planned for Tuesday, the 17th, and that was sort of going to be the center of a great new change. We had quite a few politicians and community leaders and folks planning to be at our new Norfolk campus, and they canceled that on the 13th. And in our academic life, we had 2 more weeks of our current term. So the following 2 weeks would be the end of a term, and then we would take a spring break. but it became very clear for us on Friday the 13th that things were going to be different than we had planned. And that was a time that we actually did some soul searching. We actually asked ourselves, who are the constituents that rely upon us the most? As we begin to look at actions that we were going to be taking, who are the ones that we have to keep in mind? And for us, it was the student, the staff and faculty, that's our family, and the institution, or some would say the business of the institution itself. It's interesting, when I put those three together, there are some others that I always put in there. I always include the hiring community, the employers who employ our students, that is, and the community, the people in the places around us. But it's interesting, as important as the hiring community and workforce is, and important as the community is with our schools, a responsibility question came to us right then. Who are we responsible for taking care of right now? And so everything we do and say today in this conversation is going to really center on these three constituents: the student, our faculty and our staff, and the institution keeping it alive. And those are the three that I've been fighting for over the last several weeks. So on the 13th of March, I had a video conference with my campus directors, 19 campus directors, and then the crew. And the conversation was, what are we going to do? We have it seems that schools are closing for a couple of weeks. It looks like we're going to have to do so probably quite immediately. And the question really was, how would we be able to teach the last 2 weeks of our current term? That first week, I'm calling this week 1, beginning on March 16th, was how do we save students in the current term? And we went to work to try to figure out, okay, what can we do? I challenged every campus director to create their own solution to deliver content to students. It was clear that the constituents in the form of our accreditor and the FAA and the other credentialing bodies were going to allow us to be nimble, and that's exactly what we did. Now, as we got into that week, we found that the week really started to shape up differently than we thought it would. In day 1, a couple of the states where we do business closed and had an executive order that closure was mandated. We immediately went to work thinking, okay, it's all right. We can keep teaching these students and help them finish up this term, and we'll keep on. And then all around us, it kept happening. Missouri closed. Philadelphia county closed, and then the whole state closed. And we found ourselves really scurrying to figure out what are we going to do. And if you guys remember back to that week, I think you'll probably be in a similar situation where you come up with an idea, and that idea within the next hour is eliminated because of change that was happening. Well, what we ended up doing as those two or 4 states closed, we had to abandon the idea that we could quickly finish that term, and we had to close the doors on those schools. Now, most of the states had some kind of allowance for distance education delivery. What we did, and if you haven't done this, I would recommend you do this. You probably have, but we immediately wrote notices to put on our front doors, literally to post notices on our front doors that aligned with the court or state order that was posted, demonstrate why we have business going on at all. So in the case of our Philadelphia school, we wrote in accordance, right, with the order of the governor of Pennsylvania. AIM has closed its physical location for in-person instruction and services to students as of the date that they closed it. And on March 18th, the Pennsylvania Department of Education authorized AIM to serve its students through distance education delivery. And you'll see I'm using quotes from each one. Yes, as these state orders occurred, we designed a specifically written notice for every school, so that if the authorities showed up at the school and said, why do you have people working here, we could justify that. And that absolutely did happen. As the days went, we did get some visits from the authority, both in Philadelphia and later in Las Vegas. Literally, the police came and said, knocked on the door, why are you in business here? What are you doing? And our answer was, backed up by the paperwork we posted, we're allowed to be here because we've converted to distance education delivery. I'll tell you about some of that delivery here in a few minutes. I immediately saw that what we needed to do is at least once a week talk with our campus directors about what was going on. And as that week went on, sure enough, Nevada, Virginia created executive orders. And we really labeled week 1 as saving students in their current term. Week 2 came along. But by the end of week 1, we ended up saying, look, any decision we make in our offices here may be invalidated within about an hour's time. And I know you were in the same boat. You would, back then in those weeks, couldn't do one thing without a change happening sometime later that day. And we just had to deal with that reality for a while. Week 2, we focused on our staff needs. I know you're in the same boat where your faculty and staff were afraid of coming to work, or afraid of what's going to happen, or afraid of not being able to come to work, right? That two-edged sword of, do I want to be here? And I hope I get to be here to earn. For staff, here was our orientation. We preferred to stay open so that staff could continue to get paid. To date, we have not had significant or major furloughs or terminations. And I said clearly to my staff, I hope we can stay open. As long as we can stay open and serve students, I'll be able to serve you through a paycheck. We did institute a 1-day work from home per week. That is, every employee was able to work from home, and continues today, working from home 1 day a week. We didn't want to extend it more than that because, of course, our business is one that is centrally located. In order to serve students and do the work that we do that at a location. But I was able to decrease the population of the schools by removing the students from the situation. That actually decreased our population by 85% because the 15% left over are our students. I was able to reduce that by another 20% by having everyone work from home 1 day a week. We also dedicated an additional 2-week vacation time for any employee who did have a confirmed case of COVID-19. We extended a thing we call borrowed PTO, so that if somebody ran out of vacation time, ran out of paid time off or sick leave, they're actually going to be allowed to borrow another week toward the next year's earnings. So obviously, we're being as giving as we can be. And one of the important things is we created a coronavirus task force that would meet every week to establish the situation and see what kind of things we needed to take care of. Now, as that week 2 went, Texas, Indiana went down, and by beginning of week 2, I set up another video conference, and what you're gonna see that kind of communication happen. We at least had a conference call with all the campuses every week, but in most weeks I had an additional video conference to talk about what they're experiencing, help guide them through situations, and help my campuses be able to respond correctly. Our weekly coronavirus task force has met and continues to meet. More executive orders go through the weeks, and by the end of week 2, every campus was prohibited to having students there in school, and every campus was under some type of executive order that we had to respond to in the form of what we do with staff and how we communicate that on to the public who might come by. And here's how we did it. What we did just to keep up with stuff is use an old-fashioned whiteboard. It's actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you can see it right behind me there. The whiteboard that I have, if you see behind me, I think you'll see it there, it's how we just kept up with it, almost triage style, right? As we triage the situation, I kept in place what the situation is with each campus. And if you take a look at the graphic there, you'll see that I have the open status, that is what kind of executive order. Of course, you can't read a word of my writing, nobody can, but we have it in place. And as the executive order status changed, we would change it on the board. You'll see the April mod status. That's how we're serving students in that April term that's coming up, and that's what we work with. Most of our schools have an FAA approval process, and you'll see, so we have that status, and when their approvals come, and May ultimately came up there as well. So it really was our own record keeping in one place here at our home office to keep up with the status, situation, and delivery method of each campus. So that's how we went. Now I think I said at the beginning, we had a scheduled spring break, and our hope was that during that spring break time, we would be able to help students get reoriented to come back to campus. Well, we all learned what we learned, and that is coronavirus ain't going away in 2 weeks. And every state extended their executive order, and it was very clear that we would not be spending spring break helping students get reoriented, come to back to campus. No, we would spend spring break preparing for online courses and teaching courses fully online for that time. So we had a video conference on the 31st of March to really get them ready. They had already been preparing for April, and so at that time we really kind of shared ideas. It was important that we secured FAA approval for our Federal Aviation Administration schools. The FAA had to write an individual approval for us to extend distance learning for our students, and they were very gracious about that. ACCSC, our accreditor, same thing, needed a notification. And we rapidly trained our staff on GoToMeeting, which is a tool that obviously we're on now, and most all of you have experienced. Teams, of course, is a Microsoft product that a lot of our schools were able to use. Zoom, some are using, and really, that last line is important. We were here to support the campuses as they develop their plan. And if one of the advertisements for this thing said, get ready to take a lot of notes. I'm telling you this is probably the only screen I want you to take a note on. These 3 items were exactly my job as the executive vice president of this organization. My job is these 3 things: to communicate to my campuses what's going on, what our expectations are, and what we should be doing, to equip them with training, with technology, with anything they need to make happen, and then to praise them, to call them by name. And over the last 8 weeks of this 13-week cycle, I have done everything I can do to stop and call people by name, praise them, give them something to look forward to that maybe I'll be called out. Kind of played a little bit of game with you at the beginning of the session when I called out the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Vista College and Valley College and Pinco Tech, and the game there was, it makes you feel a little bit special when you hear yourself called out from a crowd, right? And if you weren't called out, it makes you go, ooh, I wonder if he'll say my name, right? That little thing. Well, do you think your faculty and staff need that kind of thing? Look, I was a faculty member for a number of years, and I know one thing: faculty members are driven on making a difference in students' lives and recognition for good work. And so of all those 3 things, I'm not sure exactly what is my greatest responsibility to communicate, to equip, or praise, but I think that where I have the most impact is when I praise good work, and that is what we've done throughout this process, praising good work of the faculty and staff, and getting them to feel like they're making a difference and are an important part of this machine that we have. Was anybody else out there glad to see March end? We certainly were, and thought April's gotta be better, right? April's the beginning of getting back to normal, maybe. Well, here we were in April. You'll see that we have a new term beginning on April 6th, and we had prepared fully to go online. And what we spent the work as students went online for the first time, 19 campuses going online for the first time ever. It was amazing. I'm going to actually show you a little bit of what we did. We'll get back to the cost cutting thing here in a second. but fully online courses begin. Now, just like all of you, we use GoToMeeting, we use Zoom, we use some Microsoft Teams, and that's a couple of them. We're amazed at how well the students took to it. No need for me to show you much, but I did want to show you one that's very different, and that's the one on the right there, Facebook Live. Tidewater Tech is our skilled trade school, HVAC, building maintenance, automotive, and welding, largest welding school in Virginia. And it is what is amazing what they did on Facebook Live. I'm just going to end that show and run over to Facebook real quick and just show you. It was amazing. So here's our Tidewater Tech Facebook Live, and just to grab an instructor, maybe you can hear that, maybe you can't.
Hey, good morning, 261. Welcome. All right, look, if you look right there, this is one of the drawings in week 3. Okay, we're gonna go over this.
So this is our instructors really creating a communication method themselves. Here's a welding instructor, and as I just play a few words of her, take a quick glance at the student interaction.
How about dual flow? That is when you have a plasma gas and a shielding gas. And I said that when you do have a shielding gas, it could be both air use, it could be different gases, nitrogen.
So these are experienced welders working on Facebook, communicating with the students, both live and in person. And by this time, they have gotten so good at this, they've turned this thing into a show. I don't know if
This version of whatever it is we're getting done. Look, I was talking to you guys about the welper, okay? Look, this is the welper that comes in your toolbox. This is also a welper that you'd find at Harbor Freight or that you'd find at Northern, okay? This
so.
is my
All of us
personal-
have awesome success stories, that is for sure. But to see this welding school turn into, look, I've run a distance education campus before, and I've never done it this well. I have never done it as incredibly well as my faculty, who said, all right, if we're allowed to make this up, we have some skills, we can give this a shot, and they've done amazingly. And so I've done everything I could do to equip them, say, hey, yeah, you get to do this, you get to try this, and then to praise them every step of the way. So it's been very, very powerful. So during that week of April 6th, we also focused internally on some cost-cutting measures. Clearly and definitively, our start on April 6th was a little less than we would have expected. Our start coming up in May, significantly less than expected. We have to look at our budgets and say, all right, we're going to have less income than we had budgeted. We've also got to do something about cost-cutting measures. And I ask every manager and department head to take a look at what they could do to trim some costs, at least over a 3-month period. And what you see here on the left is our Atlanta campus, our Charlotte campus, our Dallas campus, all looking in. Look, we can do a little bit about staffing, a little bit about training, a little bit janitorial. We can cut a few costs there. The total, you'll see on the right, the total cost from all 19 campuses was about $675,000 a month. That's great. Everybody gave a little bit. Here on the corporate side, we reduced some advertising to the tune of about $130,000 a month, and some other administrative costs we got down some. So overall, that's $922,000, just short of $1 million a month in our organization. We plan to hold ourselves accountable for that for about a 3-month period, at least until our starts seem to peer back up. And so as many months as we have less starts, we'll also have less expenses, so that we can do the responsible thing and compensate for that on a business-wise. Remember, my 3 constituents are the student, my faculty and staff, and the institution itself. And so this is the work in week 4 that we did to make sure that we were attending to the needs of the institution. Something kind of nice was happening. By the end of week 4, we realized we were no longer making decisions an hour at a time. It was more like the decisions we made seemed to last for about a week. That's good. That's progress. So that's good. Week 5 rolls around, and we're back to looking at the students. That's about the time that it looked like the Department of Education was getting serious about the CARES Act grants. And so we spent some time looking at how we would support students through the CARES Act. And right, indeed, I had a video conference about that. Got all my campus directors together to kind of explore what this might mean. That communication was essential. Those three essentials: communication, equipping, and praising. And so here's what we decided to do with our CARES Act money. Students, of course, have to be Title IV eligible to receive a grant. We based our eligibility on EFC. Ultimately, if a student was Pell eligible, they'll be getting a larger amount. If they're not Pell eligible, they'll get a lesser amount, but every active student will get something. If there was an EFC, if an EFC had not been calculated, that student would be in the less needy grouping. Here's what it looked like. I'm happy to share with you my stuff for our students. We were awarded $6 million across, and you'll see we've got a lot of OPEIDs. We got 12 OPEIDs there. Now, I don't expect you to read all this, but I just want to show you that this is in the blue are the students under 5576 EFC. That's the needier students. We have about 3,600 needy students and about 1,500 less needy students. Each of the OPEIDs get a different amount of money from the department, and so you'll see over here in the green columns the need categories. Less needy students in that first school, 975. The more needy category gets 1,100. Those checks are going out now. We started. We actually received most of our monies last week. Students are getting checks in their hands this week and next week, and that we are very thankful for the ability to help our students through these tough times with those CARE grants. We are using a form. Every student filled out their own form, and this is how we're meeting those requirements for the Department of Education, where we had to document the instructions and information, right? We have to explain the grants and how those formulations were made. We have to assess that they're eligible for Title IV, and here's how we're, and we have to document it all. Here's how we're doing it. Every student got a form with their name, their student number, their address, their EFC, and the grant amount. Every student had to sign this form and give it back, attesting that they are Title IV eligible, attesting that they meet all their requirements, and attesting that this is their one and only grant. They sign that, they hand it back to us. We store that permanently, so we'll be able to demonstrate and justify how we communicated with the students, and the student walks away happy, able to use that grant money for their own good. And that brings us back into week 5, and we're moving into week 6, where we look at staff again. Now here, and really, obviously, we're doing a lot of things during every week, but we really wanted to drill down on helping staff during week 6, and these main focuses that we had really helped out. So another video conference with the campus directors to talk about the May term came. But I'll tell you, we did do, here's how we developed a staff plan. We have purchased no-touch thermometers for all campuses. We bought about 40 of them. That is, we've got 20 locations, including the home office. Every location gets 2 thermometers. We were able to get a lot of masks. They're not permanent masks, but they're temporary ones. But we had enough to give one for every student. We began planning for individual students returning when they return so that they could get screened. We sent a poster. Here's what the poster looked like in our advertising department. We designed this just following CDC guidelines. You'll see the handshake there. We initially had the X on top of the hand saying no handshake, but that looked like my man had been at the club the night before, so we just kind of moved that X up. Sorry about that. And so we sent 10 of these posters to every campus, so they were able to post it at every entrance and student public places. We have that posted at our home office as well. And it really was about equipping the schools with what they need to do the screening and the guidance and training they needed. By this time, here in week 6, we found, man, our decisions are starting to last 2 or 3 weeks at a time. That's a great place to be, knowing just 6 weeks ago we couldn't do one thing without it changing on us immediately. So we felt better about what we had been able to accomplish. I'll get back to that training here in just a minute because that's happening tomorrow as it goes. Week 7 rolls around and we're back to supporting the institution and the students really by preparing for the May term and beginning with the institution's CARES Act. Clearly, by the end of April, it was obvious students are not coming back into the school, at least not as normal come the May term. The May term shows up on May 11th. And as you all know, next week is not normal yet, right? It's interesting. At the beginning of this, I said, I think we could probably do 2 weeks online and then we'll be shut out of things. But we're going to keep trying. That 2 weeks came and I said, I think we could do another month online and we'll be okay. I'll tell you right now, today, I feel like we could do another 2 months online and it not make, the students are taking to it. The faculty have taken to it, and with communicating, equipping, and praising, we've been able to do that. We were by the end of April seeing that executive orders are going to start expiring. Of course, our school in Georgia, as it's well known, was that first one to have a little more breathing room. But it still was important for us to plan for the entire May term, a 5-week term, to be hybrid, so that as the executive orders do happen, or as the governors do relax the ability for students to come back in, our individual campuses can make adjustments and have students return. And of course, we're beginning to plan for the institutional dollars associated with CARES Act as well. That'll pay for a lot of the faculty training and the software and hardware that we've had to purchase to make online work. Sure enough, at the end of April, Georgia's executive order expires. Texas and Nevada, as well as the one in Orlando, expired. And just these little rays of possibility. Indiana expired by the end of the week. Now, we did not rush to immediately open those campuses and get students back. We're taking a more orderly approach to it. I'd like to describe that to you. But it was good to see, okay, it looks like at different parts of the country, things are maybe opening up and looking like a change might be possible. Jumping into May, here we are in May, and we were ready to see week 8 come around. Week 8 was really supporting students by assisting with distance education for May and assessing how it went. It's really, we feel that our students, we've had emails and calls that say, hey, why don't we do this from now on? And because our faculty had such success, it really worked. And the students seemed to accept and enjoy online courses. It was important for us to remember, it's not us doing this. Every student knows, yeah, right, everybody's doing this. Our kids are online, my nephew's online, I'm online, it all makes sense. The faculty are proud of themselves for succeeding. Part of that is we're motivating that faculty success by every chance we can, we'll highlight them and really make a lot. And you know, one of our greatest partners is Ambassador Education Solutions. We've been partners with Ambassador since 2004, our longest standing partner. And they had a lot to do with our success as well, specifically with the student perspective. And Bruce, I'd love to have you jump in here and talk a little bit about the student perspective.
That'd be great, Joel. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of online programs over many, many years. And as a result, we've learned a lot from our clients, from the schools, from the students. We've had to meet students' expectations, meet schools' expectations. And distance learning is not something that's new for us. It's been around for a while, but we've become pretty expert at making certain that schools can support their students in that environment in a way that's very, very good. There's a lot of things that we've learned too in recent years, like a new concept called equitable access is something that people are tossing around right now. And we'll talk about that a little bit and how that relates to the student experience. Course material fulfillment and accessibility. If a student's at the campus and you've got books at the campus, you give the student the book and it's done. But if the student is at home, it's a lot like the online environment of 15 years ago, where books had to be put in a box and gotten out to the student's home address. That means a lot of fulfillment materials, a lot of boxing, a lot of figuring it out, getting stuff in the mail or stuff out to one of the shippers, and then things that couldn't be delivered, things that didn't come back. Did the student actually get the books? Are they able to continue with their studies? Do they have their course materials? And every educator I've ever spoken to has said that course materials do make a difference. Otherwise, we wouldn't have books. We wouldn't need textbooks at all. So they do make a difference, and making certain that students have access to all their materials in the appropriate format at all times is very, very important. I'm winking. It's Joel's and my signal this time to change the slide. Apologies. So equitable access. So the idea behind this is, how do schools make certain that every student is set up with the technology and tools needed to succeed? And there's another factor of this too, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. So a lot of schools are taking different approaches. Some of them have very robust device programs where they provide the devices for the students, and there's devices available in varying price points and capabilities depending upon what you're going to ask the student to do with the device. But for example, there's e-readers, there's laptops, there's tablets. A lot of schools go with an e-reader if the student is only going to be reading online material, for example, ebooks, or participating that way. If they're going to be using courseware, if they're needing to type in responses, if they're needing to create papers, do assessments, do exams, and so forth, then a laptop or a tablet, a laptop is even better. A tablet is usable, but that screen can sometimes be difficult. If you have even like a 10-inch tablet, it can be difficult sometimes to bring up that keyboard, that virtual keyboard, and use it and be able to see the screen and what you're doing. So all of those things are usually considered by schools when they're concerned about making certain that all their students have a device, and they've taken the decision to be proactive and provide that device for the students. One of the things that schools have to be concerned about is, in providing devices for students, how do they do that? Do they just get a device and put it in a box and send it out to the student? If students drop and are returning devices, how is that handled? How do they make certain that one device, one student? All of these things become an issue, so the fulfillment of them becomes something that needs to be considered. And then another thing that needs to be considered is, does the student even have access to the internet? Not every student has access to the internet at home. Some of them then want to take a device and go to a Starbucks or someplace else and connect to a publicly provided internet service. Well, a lot of schools are taking the approach where they are actually providing a Wi-Fi internet hotspot to the student, and some of them are actually putting it in the box with the device along with the instructions, and that requires the school to have a program working with a communication partner like T-Mobile, like Verizon, like Sprint, and so forth, where they are actually providing the line charge and paying the line charge for that device, because essentially it's like a telephone with a hotspot. That's how it works. So equitable access does relate to devices. Does the student have ability to get to those devices and use them? Is it the right device? As far as accessibility, so how do schools make sure that every student has their course materials? And as you all know, you've been working with this for a long time. There's a lot of ways to skin this cat. So there's print, there's digital, there's publisher direct content, there's courseware, there's access code-based courseware, codeless courseware access, print on demand, and the list goes on and on and on. So these become the decisions the school has to make on how they're going to get the materials to their students. Also, there's a lot of consideration for what students want. Do they get their materials in the format that they find best and easiest to use? For example, about 15% of the average students who get digital materials and ebooks would like also to get a print copy. So there's ways to do that, and that's where a print-on-demand program comes. And this feeds back to equitable access. Are we giving the students the materials in the format that works best for them? We all know that there's different learning styles. Some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, and there's others too as well. And Joel's much more of an expert on that than I am. But I know enough about it to know that one size does not always fit all. So for providing students a way to get the materials in the format they want becomes an important consideration when you're thinking about equitable access and giving the student the comfort and ease they need so that the course materials meet their way of learning. So how do schools get the materials to their students? Well, there's a lot of different ways that schools do this. They can take advantage of an online bookstore where students are involved in the purchase. They can work in an automatic fulfillment model where the books are embedded in tuition or a resource fee. And a lot of that is done through an inclusive access model quite often with agreements and with programs that have been set up with the publishers. And what else do they need to think about? Well, they need to make certain that integrations are handled. Nowadays, it's very difficult to do things with spreadsheets and people manually filling them out. If you're a large school, very difficult to do something like that. So you need integrations and automations and automatic data transfers in order to make certain that if you're working with a partner who's helping with the course material fulfillment, that data is automatically being transferred. And integrations don't stop there. If you're using a learning management system, integrations with a digital content partner, integrations with the publishers through the LMS, all become very, very critical and very important. And then the aspects of data and analytics. So as we move to a more online world, it's not so easy to know, is the student actually sitting in the seat like it is when it's a ground campus. You can actually take attendance and you can see the student is awake and they seem to be listening and they're spending the time in seat. With an online program, not quite so easy. The LMS needs to be set up to track the student's activity, but not every school has a learning management system or could stand one up very quickly if they're transitioning to an online environment, and that's new to them. But all of these things have to be considered. And then also, the money. Publishers have to be paid for content, and eventually it's got to come from the student or from financial aid or from tuition or some other means. Maybe it's some care money. So does the school have the processes in place that are necessary to make certain that those payments can be collected, directed, sent to the appropriate people? And how does the school ensure that they're paying for each item for each student only once? A lot of times when we're in an environment like this, where we're really just trying to get everything done as quick as we can, the eye can come off the ball sometimes about efficiency to make certain that we're being as efficient as possible. And as Joel mentioned, efficiency was very critical to make certain that budget targets could be met. And this becomes a way to make certain that every student is getting their materials, but they're getting it efficiently, and the school's only paying once. All of that becomes a very, very important part of this consideration. And there's an interesting study that recently came out. A very large national school just did a study with their students in a survey, and a lot of the students participated. They have about 40,000 online students. And for them, what they wanted to look at is for students that have been using online for a long time, and some of them, they've taken as many as 31 courses, so they've probably been working with the school for a number of years. What advice did they have for new online learners? And I thought this was a very interesting and useful topic, so I wanted to give you some of the information that came out of that survey. So a couple of things that they found was, and if you have read any organizational book or any business efficiency book or any of the top 7 habits of efficient people, many of these things will seem very, very trivial. However, for students who are in their 20s or younger students or even folks returning from work, they may not have been exposed to these things all the time. So these can be very helpful guidelines for your students to make certain that some way you communicate this to them, if you're not already doing so they are set up for success in their online program. One of those things which was very, very primary was setting a consistent schedule. I know for myself, I'm working from home this week, and each day I'm getting up a little different time, sometimes a little later, sometimes a little earlier. And it's not too bad. It's within 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of my normal schedule. But setting a consistent schedule is very, very critical. And that's one of the things the students mentioned. Don't put it off. If you've got assignments to do, get it done. Be consistent no matter when it is. But consistency was the key. Prepare a comfortable workspace. If you're working from home, you may not have the benefit of an office or a nice comfortable desk to work on, but creating that space is very critical because it lends over time to being part of what makes the process of learning a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more reliable. Get to it. Turn assignments in on time. One of the things that the students found was it's too easy to procrastinate and find distractions. So they recommend that students really have to focus and they have to develop a habit of getting their assignments in on time and not letting it lag. Once you start doing so, you start falling behind. And this is one of the things they said students should really focus on. Make use of the support system. And communicating out that support system to your students is really important. How do they reach out to their teachers? How do they reach out to their success advisors, especially in a time when everybody's working from home? How do they reach them? What's the methodology? Chats, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, all these things are very, very valuable and use really great tools. Are there other ways to reach them more quickly? Do you want to set up chats through some kind of system where you can do that? There's lots of chat tools that are available where people may want to do things like that. It's up to you, but one of the things that the students recommended is that the new students must reach out to their teachers and connect with their support staffs. And then technology. There were a few technology things that these students, these long-term online students, felt were really important for students to have. One of them, obviously, was a laptop, a monitor, or a desktop. Working on a laptop for a long period of time is really annoying to me. I find it very, very difficult. I have big fat fingers, so when I use the mouse, it doesn't work very well. So a monitor, a laptop, perhaps even plugging into a docking station or even a desktop computer is really critical. If you're working on a tablet for any long period of time, you know that it really doesn't lend itself to that. So having a device that's appropriate is very important. Headphones and a headset. They found that helped with preventing distractions. And that's the reason they recommended that headphone and headset. Quite often you're listening to the teachers and there's something maybe going on in the background around you, and it becomes very distracting. So the headphones were almost a must-have, and they recommended noise-canceling headphones, which I found quite interesting. And that was mentioned by a lot of the students. Internet access, obviously, we talked about this before, and knowing that not everyone has internet access and making accommodations for that is important. And then a microphone and obviously a calendar, a small thing. And one of the other things about equitable access that we didn't mention, but I wanted to go back to in brief, is accommodations for students who have different abilities. This is very, very critical. When students are working from home, you may be disconnected from those students who may have different abilities and need certain accommodations, and it may be uncomfortable for them to ask for those accommodations. But knowing your student body, knowing and recognizing those that do need such, that is a critical part of making sure you have success through your entire online student base. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will say that our relationship with Ambassador Education Solutions really helped us because they are the ones who provide our students with the ebook readers or computer devices that the students already had for their online books, for their ebooks, which allowed us to very, very seamlessly get students online. All right, so we're in week 5 right now, and just kind of some ideas. As we started this week, the executive orders at the states continued to expire. We began sending our grant checks this week, as I told you. On the 7th, that's today, right now, we're inside of that, sharing strategies with industry friends. That's what we're doing right now, part of our communication efforts. And probably one of the most important communications efforts happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will be providing a full staff training for all 1,000 of our staff members as we come back into the new term starting Monday. I want to share with you what our staff training looks like. So tomorrow we've got a webinar just like this where we'll have the majority of our students. I showed you that we sent them I said students, I'm at schools, of course. We sent our schools a poster, 10 copies of this poster to put around their schools, and we'll be providing a presentation called Guidance for Safe Work Practices. We'll give them the normal social distancing guidance that we have. Personal hygiene, the whole wash your hands. And I don't know about you, for me, it's touching my face. I can't stop touching my face. I had no idea I was a face toucher, but man, trying not to touch my face is a challenge. Using masks. We are encouraging the use of masks for students as they come back to school. We are certainly our range of disinfecting and cleaning at our campuses is like nothing it ever had been. And as I told you before, we're doing temperature screening. Every school has at least 2 no-touch temperature screenings, and I don't know if you've done this anywhere in where you live, but it makes me actually feel kind of comfortable when I go in and they take my temperature. Now I know I'm 97.3, that's great, but even more, I know that everybody who walks in here has had their temperature done, and so we're adopting that starting this Monday, and we're giving that training. We're equipping the schools with that training tomorrow afternoon so that they all have that training under their belt. And I'm happy to report that we now feel like we're making decisions about a month at a time. We feel like we've gotten enough down where we can predict several weeks in advance, and the decisions we're making seem like they're lasting for about a month. I want to just real quickly go through what we project for the coming month. We will have a new start, and we will have new starts on Monday. We will have our Corona Task Force meeting on Wednesday, as always. We'll have our weekly campus director call to assess how things are going. For the May term, that goes May 11th through June 15th, all students will have some online content, and they're planning to start online. But as the state orders are resolved, and as we're allowed to have people come back to the campus, we will be bringing students back to the campuses in small groups to complete lab work as they're allowed to do. That means that we'll have classes, shop classes of about 8 or 9 students and 1 faculty member. And we believe that when our June 15 term rolls around, we think we'll be ready to start full with all students on campus. Now, if we're wrong about that at any school, that's okay. We can do another month of this. We actually feel like we've learned enough that we can continue, but we think that we're going to see students come back in small numbers starting on May 11th as the schools are allowed to do so. Temperature screening begins on Monday. The Missouri and New Jersey executive orders are due to expire, although I think I got word today that New Jersey might be going a little bit longer. We're not sure. On week 10, we're going to have a 2-day campus director meeting. Now, this is a meeting I have twice. I actually have a quarterly meeting with campus directors. Twice it's through telecommunications, twice it's on site. We were scheduled to be in Orlando on the 20th and 21st for this. No surprise, we've moved that online. We'll be doing that, but we'll be using that 2-day campus director meeting to assess the online courses, to assess student screening, see how that's been going for about a week. We're going to monitor our financial savings and report back to everybody. We're going to talk about the CARES Act funding and where we are. We're going to assess staff and faculty morale. Those 3 constituents, we're going to talk about how it's going with all of those in a really dedicated time as we support students, staff, and our institution slowly bringing students back. And that's how we see the following several weeks going. A lot of assessment, a lot of communication, a lot of retooling, and certainly a lot of praise to people. That gets us up into June, and like I said, we believe that on the week of June 8th, we will be orienting students to return to campus. We thought we were going to do that at the end of March. Now we think we're going to be doing that in the middle of June, so that in the June term, we hope to see students returning on June 15th. All students hopefully will be back in June 15. Again, if there are any campus that has to have a change to that, we can cope with that. We can deal with that. We're going to continue to monitor expenses. We're going to continue to celebrate incredible successes of the students and faculty. And that success, that's it. That's the big kumbaya moment, I think, that Tom alluded to at the beginning, and that we are. I mean, again, I think those three actions are really is what is essential. Really, I wish I could turn the baton over to all of you, because I know all of you have guidance and additional stories and other notes that I should be taking. But I'll tell you, the way our community has pulled together, I think has made it kind of easier on all of us. Tom, I want to thank you for what C-SPAN has done. In fact, I mean, I feel like it's almost a big kumbaya moment through our entire industry, if I can claim that. In fact, I mean, I think we should do it. I mean, it only works if you help, But if you don't mind, let's just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, we'll do it in C if you're okay with that. Join me now. Kumbaya, my lord.
Kumbaya.
Everybody sing. Let's go.
Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya.
Everybody's not singing. You're right there. Let's go.
Yeah.
Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya. Oh, that sounds so good. Big finish. Big finish. Oh, Lord. Kumbaya. Very nice. Tom, back to you, sir.
How the hell am I supposed to follow that? Sincerely, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Joel. Great presentation as always. And as always, we do have some questions. So we are going to ask for individuals. You do have the capability to provide Q&A, and we are going to do a couple of those. I'll answer a couple of the basic ones right away. Several individuals asked if the PowerPoint was going to be available. Both the audio and the PowerPoint will be available at the conclusion. It takes about 10-15 minutes on average to have it uploaded to the system and to our YouTube system, where it will then be housed and you have the ability to receive it on the C-SPEN website. And as I said, starting with this particular presentation, if you click on the handouts, you will have the ability to directly download the PowerPoint presentation once I steal it back from Joel. A couple of questions, gentlemen, as we go through this. Do you have an exposure plan in place? And if so, would you be willing to share it with the community?
Yeah, so our HR department was really at the helm of leading our coronavirus task force. And we've got a plan for just about every situation. A plan in the case that a staff member is documented to have coronavirus, and what we do, which is basically shut the school down for 24 hours, enlist our janitorial service that has a strategy for a deep clean. And then after that 24 hours and the deep clean is finished, they come back, and it's the same for students. So I will happily append that to what we do as our plan and HR document. Sure.
Thank you very much. You have a number of people saying that they were singing Kumbaya right along with you in their shelter-in-place environments. I know you felt it. I know you felt it. A couple of other things, and this one kind of is a recurring question, and it's one that I had, Joel, as kind of a cautionary tale. And I hope that the two of you would enjoy it, would agree with me. So I'm going to present it, and then we'll see. You talked about obviously now looking at your time for the preparation for individuals coming back. You talked about the fact that that is different state by state. I believe that that is one of the things that people need to be very, very much aware of, and understanding that this isn't going to happen all at once. Schools are going to have to be adaptable, as you always are, to the reality that different states are going to come back online at different time frames. You would both agree with that, right, gentlemen?
Absolutely right.
Okay.
Yep. We have some schools that actually could have class right now if we made that decision, and some schools that go as long as June 10th. So absolutely, we with my board back here, that changes and will change per state. Absolutely. Yep.
And it also may change with additional guidance yet to come from the department. Some
Absolutely.
of what the unknowns are how and what their expectations are for the transition and the conversion back. How much of this hybrid notion is going to be acceptable? How do we address things that you brought up, Joel, with regard to a number of individuals in close proximity? Some institutions aren't going to be confined so in space that it's going to make it harder to achieve than potentially other institutions. Would you not also agree with that? I mean, you had to look at space requirements as well, did you not, in determining how many people you truly could bring back at a point in time?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We, you know, we have been happy to interpret all regulation when it comes back, and even that spatial one. You know, it doesn't say no more than 10 people in a building. It doesn't say no more than 10 people in a classroom. It doesn't say what proximity means. And so we have one of the training points that we'll be giving tomorrow and that we've done consistently is defining spaces where groups of 10 or less can be more than one in a building. So if you walked into my Norfolk campus, who is able to have 10 or few students, we probably have close to 100 students in there, but in different hangars, different shops, different workspaces, and different times where they come in, so that there's never more than 10 people that are in any kind of proximity, but we're using the building space wisely so that we can serve more than just 10 at a time. Does that make sense?
It does. And again, you would agree that that's going to change by environment. It's going to change by institutions. You know, your capabilities are going to be different than others. So that plays into it. Again, another one of those questions, very similar. My current capacity licensure is currently 20 students. I'm very concerned about the social distancing regulations. Once the students start to return to the campus, and perhaps only 5 to 10 students are able to be in any one classroom. So I will need to hire additional faculty and stagger hours in order to do this. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that person is absolutely correct. The staggering of the hours. And when I said to you, no matter what the state order is, all of our students from May 11th through June 15th will have some content online. That online content is really what allows us to have everybody active, but not everybody at the campus at once. So we're trying to be very intelligent about which classes are doing online on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so that those students can then be in the classroom or in the lab on Thursday getting shop done, while we're alternating times and space and days of the week, so that hopefully we can get all the shop and hands-on activity complete. It's just not in the same way as we did in the past. I know somebody on there is going to say something about, do you think online education will stick around? Because I know all of you are going, man, we might do more of this than we ever did before. That's exactly what we're feeling. We're feeling like we might start doing this Monday and Tuesday online, Wednesday and Thursday at the campus sort of environment, because it actually works quite well.
Yeah, and Tom, we have back to your question about the classroom environment with only 10 students, you have to hire more teachers. We have a number of schools where they extend that teacher into other rooms using technology, where they're videoing the teacher, live video, streaming it into the next classroom, so that classroom, then they actually hire a proctor who's just looking over and making certain that people are paying attention. But that extends the reach of that teacher beyond that one room. And then being able to live stream that to students who may be at home because they may be ill. That's another consideration. How do you accommodate a student who may be staying at home because they do have COVID, but you want to make certain they can still participate? So looking at the technology aspect of live streaming, whether it be within the building or outside the building, the students who may be at home, that can extend that teacher without having to hire another teacher.
Excellent. I hate to be the killjoy, but I am obligated to remind you, and I hope that both of you would, again, shake your head or reaffirm, all of this is done with the advice of counsel, I'm assuming, and thorough vetting of what you're doing with the individuals that are part of your brain trust. Joel, you showed how that process unfolds, but be mindful as you go through this. You need to work with your resources, whether it be the third-party servicers and others that help you, your internal counsel. And one of the ones that I think you should press upon, that I've impressed upon individuals, is reach out to your Department of Educational individuals at the regional level. They are there to try and help with guidance on a lot of this. They are trying to stay on top of this as much as you all are. And it's a resource that sometimes may be somewhat forgotten, especially as we all start to see additional guidance coming forward and things moving forward as well. The other thing that I would remind you of is, while Joel, it is wonderful for you to talk about the potential tipping point to a new form of utilizing the hybrid model going forward into the future, a reminder from Tuesday's webinar and elsewhere, meaning the department and Capitol Hill. These temporary grantings of authority for online education are just that, temporary. If and when we return to whatever the new normal is, a lot of your ability as an institution to do this is going to be predicated on a number of things. State approval, the ability to work with your accreditor, if you don't already have full-on authority for hybrid and online education, because this is not an immediate ability to state that you're in compliance with all of those requirements. There's a lot of latitude and flexibility being given right now that when you return to full assessment, full delivery is going to require a great deal more of you and of that delivery mechanism as it's assessed by other individuals. Just a reminder to be careful in that regard.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, Tom. We will have a hard stop of distance learning for any campus that does not have distance education permanent approval. When you know, everybody says back to normal, I'll say it. When we're back to normal and our students can be back in the campus fully, we will have a hard stop with distance education, poll the schools to see who wants to go through the application process, which we all know is quite an arduous process for the state, for the accreditor, for the FAA in our case, and only re-engage it when all those approvals are in place. Totally agree with you.
Just want to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here, pardon the pun. A couple more of the questions. Any thoughts on obtaining additional insurance in case a student, faculty, client contract COVID at your school?
Yeah, we looked at our insurance and felt pretty good about it. Our insurance does cover illnesses and such. We're not exactly sure how something like COVID, you know, such a ubiquitous pandemic, how that might be interpreted or impact. So we're absolutely making sure that we follow CDC guidelines and every guideline that a state has, making sure we're not pushing anything so that, you know, we don't accidentally invalidate something insurance-wise and that kind of thing. We haven't purchased anything additional though, and so we haven't. We'll continue to follow the guidelines and hopefully there won't turn into any kind of legal situation. I will say we're lucky enough to be able to say we haven't had any instances of faculty or staff testing positive with COVID-19 while they have been active as instructors or staff members. And we don't have any students who tested positive with COVID as they have been in school. But we did react. I mean, you saw our chronology. We reacted in the right timing to where that's the case. Certainly, when students come back, there will be the possibility of more exposure where that could happen. And that's why we're doing the screening. As students come back for the first time, we will start that temperature screening and do the very best we can.
Fantastic. Kind of another one of those, but more related to the cosmetology realm. So I'll try and answer it, but I'll throw it out for you all as well. Do cosmetology schools fall in line with returning returning to school when the salons are scheduled to reopen or when the schools are scheduled to reopen? We are in Illinois in this particular instance, so we're still shut out of both currently. A darn good question. What I have been educated by individuals in the department is that you should be maintaining constant contact with the cosmetology boards. They are the ones that are the state authorizing body for your entities. So they are the ones that you should be looking to for the leading guidance in that. Keep in mind, state authorization also now requires in some institutions for you to be under the boards of regents or different entities as well to look to that guidance. So the short answer would be look first to your educating body as the ability to open the school as your defining criterion. It may be that because cosmetology is in that crosswalk between an educational facility and a salon environment in the clinic or the floor, that you have to be able to serve two masters in this regard. You've had to do it before. We know it's frustrating, but that's information that I would encourage you to look to your national accrediting bodies as well as to your national organizations and to CSPEN for more information as more becomes known. And don't ever forget your state associations. In the case of Illinois, Robert Passage and the Illinois State Association does a great job of sharing information I just happen to know in that state. So look to your state organizations as well for help and assistance as you go through that. Aaron Schneck in Pennsylvania does another great job for that, for his community in both Maryland and Pennsylvania, and so on up and down the list. Has the department set a date of when the emergency distance education should end? No, and in fact, we're very much anticipating that the department later today or tomorrow will extend the period for the flexibilities and the guidance provided under the CARES Act in their various iterations going back to March 5th with their original guidance on the interruption for students under the under COVID pandemic, the follow-up that they did on March 20th, the follow-up that they did to that on April 3rd, the follow-up that they did with that on yesterday, and more information to follow tomorrow. All of that is available on the COVID websites. All of that is available on resources that CSPEN has on our webpage. And as we are getting ready to do, one of my key announcements is we've taken a number of the questions from all of these various presentations, now well over 300 to 400 questions, broken them down into sections based on the portions of the CARES Act, whether that be the Paycheck Protection Program, whether that be the HERF institutional or student side, and whether it be the policy guidance that we're awaiting right now. Put all of those together and put those questions and answers in forms broken down even more so by subsections that we're getting ready to post on our website and update them as more and more information becomes available, like the information we learned on Tuesday with regard to leave of absence. So continue to look for various resources, and that's one of the things CSPEN is working very hard to try and do. What is our legal position if a student refuses to wear a mask?
Yeah, I'll tell you our perspective. We love the CDC guidelines and the way they phrase them, because the CDC guidelines does not require anybody to wear a mask. It recommends wearing a mask, and we are using their words on our posters, on our trainings, and to the students. We recommend they wear a mask, and we hope they will. So far, our students, those that have come to the campus in small groups, are happy to do it. It's usually a bandana or some something that is permanent. But we do anticipate that as students come back in larger numbers, some students will not, and we are simply recommending it. We do not believe that we have a legal problem for any student that does not wear a mask, and we generally hope that there's some peer pressure that makes it sort of more normalized to wear a mask. We don't think we have a legal problem if they do not.
Other questions? The number of you, just so you know, gentlemen, there's been a number of just thank yous. This is awesome. Excellent job. Well done. As well as we want to make sure that they get the copies of the presentation. So just know that once again, your community is helpful and is supportive of what you all are presenting today. I'm going to wait just a second to see if any more questions come in. You do have like 5 to 7 more minutes before questions. Joel did exactly what I was hoping to do. While we wait for any of the last questions, for those of you still with us, I, on behalf of CSPEN, want to take this opportunity to share in the kudos and the statements of great job and thank you very much to both you, Joel, and to you, Bruce, as I look on my screens, to say thank you for providing this presentation, for being part of, again, a community that is so willing to share the guidance and the work that all of us are challenged with right now during these unprecedented times, and the communal kumbayas that come with the opportunity to have these discussions. We want you to stay safe. We want you to stay well, but you also need to make sure that you're continuing to be very mindful of all of the different resources and forms of guidance on how to stay compliant, because it is a challenging environment and it is going to take time to continue to go through this. I will close, since the only other statement was, once again, another set of thank yous for all of your presentations today and all of the information that C-SPAN is sharing. Look for more. As I said, we continue to believe that more guidance will be forthcoming yet again from the department. What a week. Title IX, the reporting requirements, and now the policy guidance all to come out in 1 week. It shows you, as we've said on several of these prior C-SPAN webinars, the department, just like you, is working unbelievably hard to continue to try and get out the information, get out the guidance, get out the financing that is all part of the CARES Act initiative. So when and if you sometimes get a chance to talk to the department officials, don't forget to thank them too. They sometimes have, as you might imagine, a very thankless job, and they can feel like all of their hard work is always seems to be the antagonistic side, not necessarily we're in this together and the kumbaya moment. So at times like this, let's not forget that frontline workers in our world, and this is no way to take away from those individuals that are preserving the health of all of those individuals that are harmed. But remember, frontline individuals for us also include your third-party servicers, your Department of Ed officials, and all the other individuals that help you interpret this legislation and these regulations. With that, I want to say thank you yet again. We will be doing webinars yet to be announced next week and in the future on Title IX, as well as the new guidance. I will put a teaser out there to you that we already have an assurance from Jim Moore, who many of you know is the lead Department of Ed official when it comes to Title IX, who has attended both of our higher education policy meetings here in Washington, D.C. in the past, who will be sharing and providing the opportunity for us to schedule a webinar on Title IX in the very near future. So stay tuned for the official announcement of that, additional updates on all of the changes that are coming forward. And again, gentlemen, Joel, Bruce, on behalf of C-SPAN, thank you for your presentation today. And for all of you that have attended today's webinar and the other webinars, thank you for your continued participation as we all work through these challenging times. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers out there, and we'll see you and talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Bye, Joel.
Bye-bye.